Hey everyone, my name is Daniel Rodic, and I'm excited to have you here on a Friday lunchtime with my friend Joey Gonzalez, the CEO of Berries. Joey, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Life is good. Life is good. I got I'm wearing this sweater, so I tell everyone is literally the most valuable piece of clothing I have, because the Face Yourself Challenge was supposed to end, I think, 2 weeks, in between where COVID started. And
Yeah.
for some reason, I don't know what was going on in my head. It was like, I think it was, that first week of March. I'm like, I have like 4 classes left. I don't know if I want to wait. Like, you know what? I'm just going to do them all on by the Tuesday of that week. And I'll just finish the challenge.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
And I got the sweater, and now I literally wear this all the time. As you can see here, it's kind of like wearing away. So now it's a little vintage.
It looks better that way. A lot of times people pay for things to look that way. So well done.
Exactly. So thank you for keeping me cozy with this sweater all of quarantine. But I have lots of friends, I think, watching today, and as anyone who knows me knows how much I love what you've built with Berries, how much the community has meant for my life, and really, like, a lot of my close friends, especially in my adult life, have come through the Berries community. So first off, thank you for building what you've built, and it means a lot to a lot of us.
Thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, I mean, there's so much we can talk about. I'm so keen to understand, how it's been, building the business in a pretty challenging time. I saw your interview on CNN yesterday. That's an understatement, really, of the fact that, not only is the business around, but it's successful and it's thriving amidst all the chaos. And so we're going to get to that. But having done a couple of these, I think I'm really fascinated to just start a little bit at the beginning of kind of you growing up. And a funny other connection, I did an interview yesterday with a woman who started a company called Andy Swim, and her career started in film and television as on the producer side. And I know that was kind of your origins as well. So I'm curious if you maybe you can start there and tell me a bit more about where you grew up in suburban Chicago. What was that like? And then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, great. So it was very lonely growing up in the Midwest. I was the child of 2 immigrants, my mom from Italy and my dad from Cuba. And I was just growing up in one of the most homogenous areas of the country, the Midwest suburbs. And so there was relatively no diversity, and people really treated me and my family like we were aliens. So that, I'm grateful for that experience because it resulted in me learning firsthand what it feels like to be different, and maybe more specifically to be left out, right? So growing up as a gay Latino man in this environment, it really inspired me to seek out a different type of people and experiences, of which one example was at the age of 13, I begged my mom and dad to let me audition for a show called Falsetto Land, which was a professional musical downtown. I had no relevant experience as an actor, but I'd been taking voice lessons. And so, I took a chance, and they took a chance and drove me down. And I'll never forget, I was so nervous because the kid from Les Mis was there, and the room was just filled with all of these, young, successful actors. And somehow, by the grace of God, I booked it. And that was life-changing because, here was this suburban kid who was driving an hour into this city every day, an hour there and back. And not only was it a highlight professionally, but it was also incredible because I was immediately immersed in this culturally diverse community. And I completely thrived. It was like the best time in my life. I loved it. And my, all of my lived experiences as a child are ultimately what I think has inspired me to create an inclusive environment at Berries, where it's normal to be different. And, I like to think that we celebrate those differences. So
100%. I mean, what I think I also find very fascinating is, your early career was in performance, in being on stage. And I think that's a huge part of the experience you've, then since incorporated into the Red Room experience, and now the at-home experience and so on. So, you started booking your first, that's pretty good. You're batting 1,000 on your first gig you book. And so then you end up going to college in California. And is that also to study kind of film, or what did you decide to do for college? Why'd you go to the West?
Yeah. So, I grew up always obsessed with California for some reason, and just loved it and thought it was, beautiful and idyllic, even though I had never been. And so I got an agent from that show, started working in film and television, and continued doing some theater here and there. And that's why I ended up at USC. Really, was it had the #1 film school in the nation, and I really was, hyper focused on that. I was working a lot throughout high school, so I just went there to continue, to pursue the dream, and that's really what brought me to USC.
Yeah. And as the story starts tying together, you obviously had a great time at college. Last time we talked, I never asked you about this, but I read off of what I can on LinkedIn. So this may not be a story, but it looked like you spent a semester at sea, if I'm correct.
I did, yes. Well, 100 days on a ship, which was probably the most incredible, few months of my life. Those of you who aren't familiar with the program, it's basically you hit 12 to 14 countries within 100 days. And for us, we started in the Bahamas, and we went down through South America, went across to South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, India, the Philippines, China, Japan. I mean, it just was the most incredible experience at such a young and impressionable age. So again, it sort of reinforced all of these ideas I had about the world, being, attracted to things that were different, wanting to learn more about cultures other than my own. So it was a really reinforcing sort of identity pivotal moment for me in life.
And so you go through college, and you're still in the world of acting and film. What was your first gig you booked once you finished college? Do you remember?
Like the first.
I guess you've been booking since throughout, so it's probably a poor question. But really, what I guess I'm trying to get to is, you continue to work in the industry, but at some point something changes, right? At some point you're like, you know what, I don't want to do anymore is acting. I want to try something else. And it wasn't a seamless transition into what you end up doing at Barry's. But do you remember what that conversation was like? Of, you know what, like I'm done booking auditions, and I'd like to try something else, anything else.
I mean, it was pretty slow. I kept acting a couple years, even out of college. So I took a hiatus for all 4 years while I was there. I started to work a little bit in my 4th year. But once I was immersed in Hollywood and understood more what it meant to be a professional actor in that, I just, knew, for better or for worse, that it wasn't going to be my future. And I would say that it took, probably a year to 1.5 years for me to like fully internalize that and formally give it up, which was really tough because I didn't have anything else to fall back on. That's what I really had studied. So it was a process for sure.
Do you remember what was because you tried a bunch of different things before you ended up not even walking into the door at Barry's? What were what were your other hypotheses of like, what are the other jobs I'm going to do if I'm not going to act? What else did you taste and try along the way?
So I tried real estate. I was a real estate salesperson for a while. I mean, obviously I was a waiter, right? You had to get that out of the way.
You have to be.
That, was going on even while I was still acting. So also did real estate because at a very young age, I started to become really interested in real estate. And that's actually how I was able to build Barry's, was through my real estate investments. So I was a practicing sales real estate for a little bit. Before that, I had done massage therapy, which was the first thing that I would say I started to get involved in around the human body and anatomy. I just started to really understand how much I loved that, the human body, anatomy, building muscle, working muscle, which eventually got me into fitness, started to work out more. And Barry's was really the first, I'd say, exercise experience I had that like hooked me and made me want to come back for more. And I remember that first experience very vividly.
So, because and again, correct me if I'm wrong on the story, but I knew it wasn't immediate. And everyone, I've had this experience with a lot of my friends. I've tried to corral to come into the red room. They're like, oh, like it seems kind of intense. Like everyone looks so fit. Like I have to train somewhere else, and I'll see you in 6 months and come to Barry's.
It's always been that way, and I feel like it works against us in some ways, and then in some ways it works for us.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that it works for us is that a lot of people eventually, they're so scared to go to Barry's, and they need to go through this sort of like life moment or moment of acceptance, you can call it, where they're like, I don't care. I don't care if it's going to be difficult. I don't care if it's not, the easiest thing in the world, but it's a challenge that I want to take on, and I'm inviting this experience into my life.
Yeah,
so I think
right here.
Yeah, exactly. it really is an opportunity to face yourself, to come in there and do the work. And most people find that after their first experience, they're met with someone at the front desk who says like, don't be a hero, just do your best, and they find an instructor who like actually smiles, and instead of, saying mean things to them to incentivize them, they're actually saying nice things to them, and they're their biggest cheerleader.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's our hope, right? That's hope for instructors. And so, yeah, I think that took for me at Barry's was walk in and sort of look around the room and say, okay, like this is actually not how I was expecting it. The guy to my right is helping me with my treadmill, and the lady on my left on the floor is telling me what weights to grab. And I just felt immediately sort of embraced by the community and by the employees both.
Who taught that first class? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was actually a guy named Rich, who was a friend of mine. And he doesn't teach for us anymore. He's an attorney and still a friend to this day, but he was a great, very, always sort of just something he did on the weekends.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I'm very close with some of the instructors here in Toronto, so it's the opposite story of Chris and Karina. I spend a ton of time with them. If you look at my stats, they're number 1, 2 with both of them. And he went from the opposite side of, from being an attorney to becoming one of your chief instructors, which I love all the different ways people have become, part of the Barry's family. But so you become a client, or you're, in the room. How does that, like, not everyone starts taking, I'll put it this way. Lots of people take the Barry's class and be like, you know what, I probably can be an instructor, but no one actually ends up being able to do it because it's not an easy job. How did that happen for you? How did that transition happen?
So at that point, I was going to Barry's probably twice a day, and really obsessed with it. And I was out to dinner with Barry, actually, and one of my best friends who I lived with at the time, Alicia, and she kind of insinuated to him, like, wow, wouldn't Joey be a great instructor? And Barry kind of looked at me, he's like, you would be a great instructor. Would you ever do it? And I was like, yeah, I would do it. 100% I would do it. And so this was back in the day when there was no training program, and they just sort of would hand the mic over and say, good luck. And it was very weird because your audition was essentially like a real life paid class. Hopefully you were going to do a good job. And so I taught a Saturday morning at like 10 a.m. was packed. It was sold out.
Wow.
And it was, I obsessed obviously prior with my programming and my timing and my music and everything. And just, right away from the first time I taught, I was like, this is for me. I want to do this. I love this experience. I love this brand. And it also merged together, I think, this passion I had started to develop for exercise and the human body, and my performance background. And so that was the beginning of what we call my enter-trainer, tenure.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well,
and that friend Alicia she was next in line, and she became an instructor soon thereafter, and she still teaches to date in New York City.
Yeah, no, I remember I've taken one of her classes as well. I think I snuck one in at like a 10 a.m. in between some meetings in the Chelsea studio. So yeah, she's great. It's so you're now a trainer, and this is the part where I also want to touch on something you had mentioned in passing was you eventually become a partner and operator operating partner of the business, but you bought in through what you did on the real estate side. Tell me a bit more about, because it's clearly a passion for you. I know last time we talked, that was an area of like that part of the world is another passion outside of what you do at Barry's. What was your first investment property, the first house or building that you bought and sold? Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, it was a duplex. So it was income-producing property, and I was fairly young. As you know, LA, can be pretty expensive. So we tried the fact that I had to buy a piece of property and a mortgage because of a unit that I could lease to help me. And so staying in from, so many years of work. And I think my parents helped me a little bit on that first house. And that was the house, it more than doubled than I think like 3 or 4 years, 2000, 2001. And that was the house that I took an equity line out to open Barry's New York City. And so that was really scary because I took enough money out that if Barry's hadn't worked, I'm not quite sure what I would have done. I really leveraged that piece of property, and it just kind of is so true that you have to really have faith and believe in yourself, and that in order to really make it, you have to take risks.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't. And, I'm just grateful that in this case, I remember we had projected Barry's New York City to pay back within 2 to 3 years. And it was less than a year. From that moment on, we used all of the cash that was generated just to continue building the business. So we opened up, Tribeca and NoHo and studios in the Hamptons, and we had San Diego by then. And so we were sort of just at the beginning of growing this brand. And that was in 2011. So it had already been around for, at that point in time, from 1998 to 2011, 13 years. And the founders, Barry J and his 2 investors, John and Rachel Mumford, for a long time, for a decade, loved it and believed in it. But I think we're fairly complacent. They made a great living, and John, the initial investor, didn't have to be an attorney anymore because they could live off the business. And they were older and had kids that were growing up. And so nobody of the 3 of them necessarily had the desire or the confidence to scale this business. And I came in sort of young and wide-eyed, thinking that like this should be everywhere. And part of that was, I think, having not been from LA, I would have a lot at me, from outside of the state or even outside of the country, and take the class and say things like, this really should be in Chicago, or how is it possible New York doesn't have this, or why don't we have it yet in London? And so hearing all of that feedback made it pretty easy for me to bet on the business and to say, like, I really think that this is portable. And I think it's going to make sense outside of LA.
So you kind of answered the question of what gave you the conviction to do it. What was the conversation like with those initial operating, like with Barry and the 2 other investment partners, to actually open up New York? Because it's, you're putting in money, so obviously you're fronting some of the risk, but it's, to them, it's like, hey, you're taking our baby, our thing, the nice little thing in LA, and who's this crazy kid that's gonna, blow this up around the world? Do you remember what that first couple of conversations
were? It was
like?
a very time-intensive, laborious process. I mean, it took 5 years, I think, from beginning to end, of when, maybe even longer. I opened San Diego, which was my first studio as an investor, in 2009, and I had started at Barry's in 2003. So it took 5 or 6 years to get there. I think on the 5th or 6th year, I was always and continue to be like very honest and transparent and clear and direct with people in business. And I just said, I love this brand and I think it needs to grow and it should be everywhere. But if you don't want to do it with me, I'm going to do it alone. Let's just do it my way. And I'd rather do it this way. And that was finally what I think pushed them to think like, oh, this guy, he's going to do it. Like he's going to make this happen, and we can count on him. So that was really, I think, the
Yeah. A fun point on the San Diego studio, I was able to catch it, I think, around probably now a year and a half ago, just before you renovated it, because it's been now upgraded to look and feel like the rest of the studios. It felt like a little blast in the past of, I'm pretty sure the version I saw was the version you had launched back in 2009, because it had the bathroom in the room itself. It had the chin-up bars and all of that. So it's pretty amazing. So so this actually begs another point around building the brand. And I think that's been a very interesting evolution of, again, that San Diego studio, at least when I went to, was a lot more rugged. The lockers were these little like metal cubby lockers in the studio. And now if anyone goes to a Barry studio, it's very grand. It's very beautiful. You have these amazing murals that you've created. At what point, like at some point you opened up a studio that didn't look like the other studios that you had launched before. And do you remember what studio was that, and what prompted this change in the brand, and what were you trying to accomplish?
It was Barry's Chelsea. And that was the first studio. So every studio before then, and there were only three, San Diego and then West Hollywood and Sherman Oaks, had this, 800 square foot studio that had probably around a capacity of 28 to 32 max, with one little toilet room in the studio. So you'd have like a line of 20 people either using the bathroom or trying to get dressed before and after class, and a really small lobby at the front. But you have to understand that Barry was a total frontier, right? There was no such boutique fitness. And so his vision was, in order to sign a lease for 2,000 square feet, like that was a completely different model, right? And it hadn't been proved yet. And so I completely understand why that's the place that we started. By 2010, which is when I signed the lease in New York City, it was a different world. There was a boutique fitness landscape, right? And there were some other big players in the market, SoulCycle, Flywheel. And so part of my diligence was to look around and see what our competitors were doing and what they were offering and how the experience felt and all of that. And so I did that. I went to New York City because that's where most of them were, opening, and came back and said to my partners, like, we got to step it up. Like we need a locker room and shower situation plus. And luckily, my husband is in food and beverage, and his focus is on California, fresh, healthy. And so he and I spent months together designing shakes and figuring out like how to build this piece of the business, which eventually would be called Fuel Bar. And I loved the idea of it because it felt like not only a place to continue to deliver on our commitment to transforming lives through nutrition, but it also became this sort of focal point to gather and hang out before after class, where people would just like hang on their laptops and order their PB&J. And so Chelsea was that first studio. It had a fuel bar, it had locker rooms, it had showers, and it felt like we were not only delivering the best workout in the world, but we were also now delivering the best experience in the world. And I'd say from then on, we became focused on ways from a brand standpoint to Barry's more friendly and premiumize it, right? Because we started to have some other competitor space come to be that were offering HIIT training, right? Not necessarily spinning, but HIIT training. But none of them were doing it in a premium way, right? They were doing sort of like taking what Curves had done and trying to scale across the country and open thousands of locations. And I'm sure you know the brands I'm talking about. And so I sort of took a look at them and I was like, okay, I get it. I get what they're doing. But I would love to be sort of the more premium option of that. I would love people to come and
I think Joey
We started to, have really great amenities partners like, Mountain Gets was the first, and now, as most people know, Orbe is what you'll wash your hair and skin with at Barry's. And just to elevate it, started to elevate like our finishes and make the studio spaces feel as premium as possible. Invest in little Instagrammable moments with our, famous quotes and our cool neons. So that was really sort of the evolution of the brand. And somewhere along the way too, we decided to drop the word boot camp because in a lot of feedback from our learned that was actually part of what scared them. And the truth was, it wasn't a boot camp. It was a treadmill weights class, So why were we calling it boot camp? I think originally it was because Barry did teach. His style was very intense, and it was a different time in life and a different generation, but you did not want to do anything wrong in Barry's class. So there was like a lot of camouflage on the walls and netting, and it was very literal. But we evolved so much, over the 15 years. And so we dropped the word boot camp, which has served us really well because now we've started to augment our offering and add different sort of modalities. So boot camp wouldn't have, lasted anyway.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of bringing us closer to present day. And before I jump to that, the one thing I also find very unique about how you built Barry's when it was a pure brick and mortar business up until innovation was required during COVID. How did you actually build a brand where, if I look at any other iconic brand that's been built, they invest so much into paid this and TV that, and Barry's has been built, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's been built organically through the community, through its instructors, without any of that. And I am blown away by that because you've built such an iconic world. It was on SNL. Like, I think that's an amazing accomplishment. I don't know what you think about that, but I thought that's a pretty good hallmark. So walk me through like how did you think about, like, I guess, marketing the business without doing what everyone else did? I think that I'm so fascinated by that.
Yeah. I think, there's a whole industry now called community marketing, which is really what we've been doing for 22 years. And that's just leveraging your own community to do that work for you. We actually didn't even dabble in paid social or any of that until about 2 years ago. And our spend to date is fairly conservative. We love to have, friends with benefits campaigns where, obviously there's something in it for you as a client, but we really want you to bring people to Barry's that you trust and love and think would be a great addition to the family, right?
Yeah.
And so as a value brand, that's always been really important piece of our strategy. How do we want to grow this community? Do we want to randomly sort of throw darts at a board and ask people to come in? Or would we rather treat it like, a party and have our people that we know and trust who understand our ethos bring in people that they think are a good fit? And that, latter way is obviously how we chose to grow the brand. And then I think separately, one incredible resource has always been our instructors. They are regularly and often targeted by, fitness apparel brands, and everybody wants to use, popular group fitness instructors to push their products. And we, Barry's has been this incredible platform that's really helped build a lot of big fitness personalities. And there's upside for us, right? Because as they gain followers and as they gain spotlight, they're promoting their own classes and they're promoting the Barry's brand. So I think that's another piece that has been a part of our success.
On the point of the almost you turning your clients into ambassadors, I've gotten a lot of joy out of it. So I would say, as a support to it, everyone who's watching from Clearbank will know when I started at the company, our office was very close to the studio, the Richmond studio in Toronto. And so I started in our Slack group or Slack channel. There's a hashtag Barry's channel that I would use to recruit people. And I think we got it up to like a quarter of the company in this Slack group.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah. And so
well, see, We love people like you. Thank you for that.
Yes. I'm the everyone thinks so. Like, what's the deal you have with the studio? I'm like, I don't know. Chris just comes and yells at me and kicks my ass, and then I bring more people to the to the group. That's how it works.
That's amazing. Love it.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's really like when I talk to a lot of founders, I also have lots of questions of like, okay, well, how do I optimize my marketing and this and that? And there's lots of tactics you can obviously do, but I think it fundamentally comes down to how good is your product. And if you don't have a good product, you can burn millions of dollars into marketing and nothing will happen. Whereas if you have a great product, you can use marketing as a lever how you want. I'm sure if you decided to change strategy and wanted to invest millions into marketing and all that, you would just scale the business, because the product is so great. And so anyway, that's really just my comment on that. But it really leads me to where the world is today. And so I want to spend the back half of it with you is that, and I said this when we were in the kind of the prep room. I think what you've done running, which at the start of COVID, a brick and mortar boutique, fitness brand that relies on us walking into the red room and making sure the business thrives over the past 12 months is like absolutely insane. I can't think of any CEO or leader who could do that and, keep the community together and keep the business running. You won Entrepreneur of the Year last year. Congratulations for that. And there's a longer question I'll ask, but very shortly, how did you do it? Let's start there. How did you do it? How are you doing it? How are you?
Honestly, it's a hard question to answer because truthfully, there's so many people, right? Barry, as you were talking earlier about product, and our product is people. Mm-hmm. And so none of it would be possible if I hadn't hired and trusted the right people. I think one of the characteristics about me as a leader that's made it easier to get through the last 12 months is I'm not, your typical CEO. I'm an entrepreneur and a founder. And so I thrive in a type of environment where I have to innovate and think about how to do things differently. And when COVID happened, instead of going into this like panic mode, it just reminded me of 2012 when I was trying to figure out like how I'm going to pay that utility bill. You know what I mean? It was just like a very familiar, comfortable feeling. And I was sort of like, oh, I didn't think I was going to see you again.
Here we are.
How are you? But I remember you and I know exactly what this feels like. And I know that the more that I can sort of inspire the team around me to keep going, and to be, a lot of it is like state of mind. How do you keep people optimistic and compassionate? Because when that starts to happen, people start to not get along with one another, and fear does a lot to us, right? And so I've already touched upon actually a lot of values within our organization. One is fearlessness, mm-hmm. Another is innovation. And so it was really through sort of embracing those values and focusing on our vision statement, which is transforming lives worldwide, that we got through COVID, which was, okay, how do we continue to connect with our community and transform lives? Like we've just been shut down, 75 studios around the world. I think I'm going to go live on Instagram and teach a workout class because that's what we do, right? And that's what we just have to keep doing no matter what. And so we went live, I think 12 hours after studios closed, and we had over 20,000 people join from around the world, which was wild. None of us had expected that. And so that sort of, gave birth to this notion of like, okay, for so many years we've talked about like, we've never prioritized a digital product. But now that we're stuck for God knows how long, we need to. And we need to figure out like how we can continue to connect with our clients in a way that we have historically through this digital product. And whenever I, think about our digital product, I remember a well and good panel that I sat on maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and they said, the whole focus was like the history of fitness is digital. And I kind of reminded them, I was like, look, we've all been through this before. Like Jane Fonda in the 80s, that was my first,
Yeah.
foray with fitness. And it's cyclical, and digital fitness is gonna be here forever, but they're always gonna be coexisting, right? And they're always gonna be these two pieces. And what Barry's does best, I think, is we give, a top-notch client experience for in studio. And one of the things that clients love about Barry's is each other. And I can't see a world where we deliver a digital product without me being able to say, like, oh, there's Dan over there, or there's John over there. Like that social piece, that component of like feeling a part of a group doesn't work for me. Like the digital thing doesn't work for me unless we can do that. And so where I'm getting at now is, after we did this Instagram Live and we started to think about like, well, how do we want that experience to feel? It was really then that we laid the foundation for the digital product, which still hasn't launched and will within like a month or two. And so what people have seen and experienced today with Barry's at Home is very similar in nature to what we're launching tomorrow. And that, we've had to use Zoom, we've leveraged Zoom, and other third parties to help us get there. But it's this many-to-many experience instead of a one-to-many, right? Like when you do Peloton or some other at-home experience, it's you watching an instructor with lights on them, performing, which has always kind of been most boutique fitness's thing. Like it's always been their thing to show up to an instructor on the stage with lighting, but our thing has always been face right? You versus you. And how do we get that piece digitally? And that's how, is through many to many. It's through your ability as a client to turn your camera on. And to not only see, but to be seen, right? And moreover, to see the other people in class who are with you. And our, app that we'll be launching will have all of these things fully integrated into the Barry's brand, where you'll have, social components. You'll be able to turn on your like red light filter so you look a little better. It's really exciting, but it was all a happy mistake. All came out of, it was a silver lining of this horrible experience. I don't think anybody loves the fact that we've been through the last 12 months. But, I'm so proud of the Barry's team for putting our heads down, staying as optimistic as possible, innovating, being nice to one another, and really making lemonade out of lemons, frankly.
Yeah, you got to make the most of it. On the red light filter is very, very funny. So I bought a bunch of these Philip Hue lights for the sole purpose, and I wish I was in my other room, in my living room. That's where I'll do my classes, and I can turn my whole, especially I do it at nighttime, and I can like turn all my lights to a red room. So when I'm on the camera, it's and that's how I programmed actually. You won't see it here, but my Alexa will be like, Alexa, turn on the red room. And then all my lights go red.
I did that to my garage, actually.
I saw that. That was amazing.
There's that sort of like feeling you get when you walk. During the pandemic, I would walk into that garage and I would like almost be in tears because it just felt like I was home. I was like, I'm in a red room.
That's all I'm craving, honestly. I started doing the classes now with my like earbuds in because it's a bit louder and you can hear the bass in it. I'm just like, I'm just craving, like the Yorkville studio especially, somehow it was built where the speakers almost shake the floor. And I was like, I'm just craving that, like of just like going full bore on a treadmill and just feeling the bass like bludgeon my head.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's been great to be back in the red rooms. I know Canada is a little further behind and we'll have some more time to get there. But it has been really nice to step in, and the outdoors has been incredible. I mean, to be able to have that experience outside of the red room and to be reconnected, human beings around you, and to get fresh air and take in vitamin D, has been really incredible. And then, after that, to be able to step back into the red rooms and have that like sort of bass thumping through your veins and, lighting on your skin, it definitely, it's been great.
We had a brief summer of some red room, at least at some capacity, which was nice. We had a little high five through the glass and all that. Well, we're kind of wrapping up. We have one question I'd love to take from the audience. It's not necessarily related to our conversation right now, but it's from Justine. And so she asked, Joey, in your process, have you ever faced imposter syndrome? If so, how did you overcome it? Thank you. Justine, thank you for listening.
By imposter syndrome, do you mean Me Too businesses?
I think I'm going to kind of interpret Justine's question. Every CEO, every founder, I myself have lived through of like, hey, like everyone's expecting me to go lead this organization, this team. And like, I've never done it. I don't know what's going on. I haven't had to figure out how to launch a new product in a pandemic with this, real estate stuff dragging the business in one direct. Like, that's what I assume she's asking.
Yeah. Kind of doubting your abilities.
Yes.
And I would say often. I've been doing this for how many years now? It's been 17 years.
Yeah.
Going on my 18th. And I think I'm trying to figure out the answer to, the other side of this question, I think, is like, how did you handle it? Right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What I'm trying to figure out. I've definitely experienced it. I think the way that I've handled it is through that, I guess, optimism I've mentioned a lot. And also the risk taking, they're sort of interrelated. So like the optimism is something that it might be something that like you're born with, or maybe you can learn through meditation, but like it really has helped serve me, because in most cases, I do believe that I can get it. I experience fear of failure every time I open a new studio. I'll like say to my head of ops, like, is anyone going to come? Like I always have those moments, but there's like the optimism piece, and then there's the fear piece. And the fear piece is like, a lot of times in life, you have the choice to go two different ways. And one of those directionally might have more risk associated with it, and the other might be safer. I almost always choose the riskier one, because the thing I hate most is regret. And so I have tried to live my life being okay with failure. That's like the other piece of it. And I always use as a comp the way that our muscle works. A lot of times when I'm teaching, I'll say to people like, grab a heavier weight. Are you nervous you're going to fail? That would actually be ideal, because when you fail, your muscle is building, right? And that's the same way with life, is that the biggest fear is that you're going to fail, right? And I've failed 1,000 times, and it's through that failure that I actually have learned to succeed.
Yeah. I think every entrepreneur who's tried, it's all the stuff that didn't work that helps us figure out what's gonna work. If you don't try anything, you don't learn, right? That's really
exactly.
It. And so obviously we're all having our fingers crossed that the world slowly opens up and we can be back in the red room together and all of that. But you're still investing in now this digital product, which I think, as we've seen even before the pandemic, there was already growth in the digital fitness category. What are some of the things that you're generally excited about, whether it's personal or professional, with the studio or with personal? Are you still do you have any fun real estate projects going on? What's going on in the world of Joey right now?
Yeah. I'd say I'm really excited about the launch for Barry's X, which is going to be our digital app, because I'm curious to see who the users are going to be. We have so many internally, we have so many theories, but I think there's a huge opportunity for a new client acquisition play, because what we've seen at Barry's at Home is a lot of people who live in markets or regions where we don't exist and may never exist. And that's been really exciting for me, because it's so cool to be able to scale the brand to new clients. And to help people who may live in places like, suburban Midwest feel like they're a part of something special and different like them. But then there's also this exciting idea that this will help already existing clients have a hybrid Barry's experience, where they are in studios 75% of the time, but when they're not, they're with us digitally, or vice versa. They're taking Barry's X 75% of the time and then going to studios the other 25%. Or I think there's also like an exciting, client who is always in studio but needs it when they travel. So I'm just excited to like finally look at and collect the data and see who it's serving. And then personally, I'm excited for this summer to just have more, family time and do a little bit of traveling, because we won't have an HQ that people are going into for another couple months, probably until the fall. So this work from home environment has just been fun for me to be able to spend more time with my kids.
Yeah. How are they doing? Are they having a good time on the beach and enjoying more time with you and John?
Yeah. No, they're great, and they're in school. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
And they're just 4 and 5, so still sort of like figuring out life, which is fun to be a part of. But most people said, I feel like the ongoing joke was like, thank God I didn't have COVID, but I can't imagine what might have been like if I hadn't had my kids. Like, they honestly were a saving grace for me. So
yeah, no, I can imagine. Well, I'd love to wrap up with one final fun question for us to, maybe we can get moving after our interview today. We have lots of people who have been sitting at desks who are watching this on LinkedIn and other channels. And obviously the answer is when Barry's X comes out, everyone please come download it. Joe, if you send me a link, I will share it. I will recruit all the friends. But if there's someone who is, feeling like, hey, I really want to get moving, I don't know what to do to exercise, I'm afraid to sign up for this. Like, as putting on your hat as a trainer, and I think we didn't really talk about this, but it's worth mentioning for those watching. Joey still teaches classes, and when the studios are open, you can take his classes. And in my head, my first Barry's class was yours when you opened up Toronto. I had done one.
Cool.
I had done one in San Francisco, but I wasn't really like sold on the brand. I kind of just did it casually, like, oh, I saw this thing coming, whatever. But I remember your class, the music was so good. And I remember the moment where like, oh, this is going to be fun, of like, whatever your song you were playing, you're like, all right, we're just going to max the incline on this treadmill. And I felt like I was like climbing a mountain. I was like, well, who is this Joey guy? But this is awesome.
Still my favorite part of the job is getting in the bedroom and teaching.
Yeah. So for those as like, prospective clients or people who just, may feel down on themselves physically, like, what, if you would give us what's something I can do today to start moving, to start incorporating fitness in my life, and at least start my journey to eventually hopefully show up in the Red Room or on the digital app in the future? Yeah.
So I think the most important thing is, first of all, if you can make it social. And that's something I think makes Barry so fun, is that social component, right? Being able to see people, talking to them before and after class, even if you just start off going for a walk, that maybe turns into a jog with a friend who's in a similar place to you. That's going to make it more fun. And there's a layer of accountability there that exists, maybe without necessarily knowing it, that really helps, I think, motivate people.
Mm-hmm. So I love it. Well, again, thank you for taking the time. I don't know if they're still watching, but if Chris, you're watching, or Karina or Zahava, thank you to the Barry's Canada. We have you up here, Barry's Toronto, up on my wall. Thank you for sticking with us during all of this. I can't wait to see all of you in the Red Room, or at least on Zoom in the next couple of days. And Joey, thank you again. You've built something that's impacted my life personally. So thank you. Many other of my friends, you've changed all of our lives. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And I can't wait till
having me.
This is amazing.
Can't wait to see you the next time in the Red Room.
I'm waiting to, I have a hill near my house that I just sprint up that hill of like, I don't want to lose my legs. Like when we sprint, I want to still hit the max sprint, so I can't lose it.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great weekend. And for everyone watching, we'll see you again on Monday on LinkedIn Live with Founders Live. Thank you so much.
Thank you.